I think we're on the verge of losing our republic. If I could do the loud whistle, which I can't do, but I would whistle and say, hey, everybody, over here to the civil realm, let's serve Jesus here too.
Welcome to Grounded, a podcast for restoring the church to a biblical foundation. Today, we're talking about a book that I read recently. Loved it. Want you all to hear about it. The book is titled The Forgotten Realm. The Forgotten Realm. It's true. Civics for American Christians. My guest to help me talk about it is the author of that book. Her name is Elizabeth Landis. Say hi, Elizabeth.
Hello.
Hi, so nice to have you here today. You're in Moscow, Idaho. I'm in northern Harford County in Maryland. Let me just give a little bio so our readers will know who you are. You serve as assistant to the president at New St. Andrews College, and you're working to help believers move from, this is good, to move from concerned citizens, and I'd say I'm more there, and you want to move me to faithful, biblically informed participants in the civic sphere. That's a great aspiration. So we're going to talk about your book today, your book, The Forgotten Realm, Civics for American Christians. Let's just talk about the title for a second. Why did you name it The Forgotten Realm? What do you mean by it's a forgotten realm? I think I know what you mean, but what do you mean?
Well, I had been working on this book realizing that Americans didn't understand our systems of government here in the United States. And I couldn't come up with a title. And I was obviously talking to my husband about this all the time. And I said, it's just like nobody remembers there's a civil realm. And he said, well, Elizabeth, why don't you title it The Forgotten Realm? And
bing.
Yep.
Your husband came up. So it certainly is a forgotten realm. And, I have to say to my shame, well, look, I went to public school, all right? And they, at least in my day, that was back in, I graduated in 72, a little ways back. And man, we didn't learn anything about government, how government works, what the different levels of government are, how you can be involved in government. And pretty much as a Christian ever since then, a lot of Christians have just been silenced by this neutered post-war consensus that, well, we don't talk about politics, we don't get involved, we're just about the kingdom and all that kind of thing. And so your book is really, really needed for people who want to do something and help save America or make America a better, more God-honoring place. So I love the title of your book. Now, you sent one of our guys an email yesterday, and he forwarded it to me, and I want to talk about some of that's in here. You say, and I'm reading this, listeners, I'm reading this with Elizabeth's permission, from your vantage point, our Christians, our relationship as American Christians to our government is tenuous to the point that I think we are on the verge of losing our republic. That's why I spent years writing this book. All right, tell us about that, would you? I'm really fascinated by that. I'm very open to hearing what you have to say. Why are you saying that our relationship to our government is tenuous? Well, that's pretty obvious maybe, but why are we on the verge of losing our republic too? Talk about both of those, please.
Oh, sure. It's a realization that I came to as I was writing the book. I first thought we just need to be educated on civics. And then as I continued to grow in knowledge of our American systems of governance, I realized Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution promises every state in the nation a republican form of government. Nowhere in the Constitution is democracy mentioned. And so then I thought, well, okay, republican form of government, what does that mean? Well, that means that we, the people, elect others to govern in our place. And then it's our responsibility not only to vote for them into office, but also to educate and influence them once they're in office. So our job isn't to push the lever at the voting booth and then we're done. Our job is then to come alongside. And so as I talk to people, I find they don't know who represents them at very many levels of our government. Everyone knows the president, and we don't call him Mr. President. We just call him Trump, which is disrespectful. But do we know other levels of government and who represents us there? Do we know those people by name? Have we contacted them? Are we influencing and attempting to educate them? Or are we trusting the lobbyists to do all of that for us and the political parties? I think when I just survey the people that I know in general conversation, I realize, oh my goodness, we're so disengaged. This can slip away from us.
And that's why you feel that we're on the verge of losing our republic.
I do.
Because we're not engaged at the levels we need to be engaged at. We don't even know what some of those levels are. Again, your book was very enlightening on all this. We really want to encourage people to buy your book, or can they listen to it somewhere? Probably, right?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
All right.
It's in paper form right now. And I'm coming out with my second version of it very soon. And it's in paper form. And it's long, so you have to be committed. But if there's an area that your listeners are interested in, it's not a book written where you can just dig into an area. But if there is a crisis, you can go to that level and at least figure out that level. But it all fits together, and that's part of why it's such a long book.
Very good. Now, I want to say, for our listeners' sake, I read a lot of books. Some of them are this thick, and I didn't think it was a long book. So take courage, reader. Buy a copy of it and read it, all right? You'll really, really enjoy it. Let's go directly to city government. Mm-hmm. I don't live in a city, so I guess this doesn't apply to me. Is that right? You have to live in a city for this to really apply?
Well, it depends. You live in a state that has counties. Not all states do.
I didn't know that.
But you do. And so the county should have a county seat, which is, in a sense, the capital city of the county. A few states have more than one county seat.
Yes.
But that city that you're close to in your county does make decisions that affect you.
Yes.
And so that still is a place that you would want to influence, although not as heavily as you would want to influence your county.
Say more about that again. What makes the local city level so important for everyday Christians? So, we're sitting in this room right here, and our church is near Harford counties, our county's city center like that. It's called Bel Air. It's the big town around it. The courthouse is there and so on. So, we're near that place. What makes that place, that level of government, so important for everyday Christians? Let me add a question to that. So what real world difference would it make if Christians, if more believers understood and faithfully engaged at the city level? What could be done?
Well, quickly, as a preface to that, there are different realms of government that God has set over us. And we're very familiar, you're a pastor, with the realm of the church. We're very familiar with the realm of the family. The third realm is the realm of civil government. We're not so familiar with that. And yet all of those fit together like a Venn diagram with Jesus Christ at the center. In him we live and move and have our being. And so the closest place for most of us to begin to engage with our American government is at the city level. You might live in a New England town or a Midwestern town, and the town I would use as an equivalent term for the city. The structure is just slightly different, but it accomplishes the same purpose.
All right, that's very helpful.
Yeah. And so that is a place where it's very easy to find out when your representatives of your city meet and to go and observe and see now just what does it take to run a city? What needs to be done? What's the reason for a city? And I could just answer that quickly. A city is a voluntary association of people who at one point in the past gathered together because they wanted certain services that they couldn't have if they lived rurally. And so they're under a city charter or municipality that then is under the state constitution. And so they're autonomous to a degree, but not to the degree that they can defy the state constitution or the state statutes.
So I think you just gave us a good example of what John Q. Citizen can do to get more involved in his local city government. And that was go to find out when they meet and go to some of the meetings. Do you have other ideas how our listeners can start getting involved or paying attention to their own city government right now?
You could check the news source that reports on your city. newspapers themselves are going out of fashion, which makes it very hard for the typical citizen to follow what's going on. I happen to have worked with Roman Roads here in Idaho. That's a publishing house, but it also has news source that follows the city and county government. So if you don't have that, you might have to start that. And if you need to start that, then my book gives some suggestions on how to start that. So that takes us back to the best place to start is to locate the building where your city meets. And then online, you can start online, find your city government website, find out what type of government your city meets under. There are different types of government and different structural models. And my book on the city goes through those models. And your website may or may not tell you what model your city uses, but you can figure it out by reading the chapter and saying, there are these qualities on our government website. And then find out who represents you, and then go and watch them in action. And if you can't watch them in action, you can most likely watch recordings of the meetings. You can also look at prior meetings minutes, and you can look at the upcoming meetings agenda and find out what your city even dealing with.
So let's say you start doing that. One of those means, maybe you can actually go to a meeting, you hear what they say, and you're aghast at some of it, and you're encouraged by some of it. What can you do then? How can you have influence?
Well, we're Christians, so the first thing we do is pray. And the second thing we do is pick our jaw up when we're aghast. I have a chart in chapter 3 that talks about the types of people you'll observe in the civil realm. And that can help you get your bearings just a little bit on what you're going to see. Know that you're not alone. If we neglect anything in life, let's think about, say, our yard. If we don't weed and mow it, it's atrocious. And that's what we've let happen in the civil realm. We've let our yard grow. We've let the weeds go. And if you go in to see what's going on, you need to brace yourself. And change is slow. We serve God who taught us about the mustard seed. Things start slowly. And we need to always ground ourselves, which I love the name of your podcast, ground ourselves in his word so that we can be effective when we interact with the city government. And also know that when we're aghast at some of the policies we might observe that are going on there's law and policy on one hand, but on the other hand, there's always the Great Commission. What my book tries to help us as American citizens who are Christians realize is that one of the most obvious places that we can go and minister in the name of Jesus, share the gospel, show the light of Christ to others is in the civil realm, because that realm is very dark right now because we've been absent.
All right, I'm going to leave city. I'm going to bypass county governments because, according to your book, and I think you're right, they're largely sheriff, courts, jails, roads, property taxes, elections, public health, land records, etc. That's a lot of county government. Am I right, or is there more you want to say right there?
Yeah, there's a little something I want to say. There's a reason for all of that. County government is an arm of the state. And so back to the when I explained city government, a voluntary association of people who gathered together and incorporated themselves under the state constitution, county government is a pre-existing arm of the state, and that's because in many states, the state capital is so far from where people live that they have outposts designed, and those outposts were called, in most places, counties. If your listeners are in Louisiana, they're parishes. If your listeners are in Alaska, they're boroughs. And Rhode Island simply doesn't need or have counties because it's small enough everybody can get to the capital. And Connecticut got rid of their counties in the 1960s. They have regional councils of government. And so my book uses the term county equivalent to kind of cover everybody. That's why it deals with those offices that you mentioned.
Very good. But let's move now to state government. which is like, I think you call it, or maybe these are my words, the powerful middle layer between local government and national level. There's a lot of power in state government. So why is state government such a big deal? Why should it be such a big deal? It's hardly a big deal for most of us. Why should state government be a big deal for everyday citizens, Christians? We tend to focus on, D.C. and the big election every 4 years, and then forget it all for another 4 years. Why? What do you want us to know about the state level, and how should we engage more at a state level?
Well, let's talk more of a global perspective on the state level. We'll back up just a bit, and we're not nationalists as Christians. So I would not describe myself as a Christian nationalist. I would describe myself as a Christian federalist. And the reason for that is our American system is a federalist system, and it's set up with a division of power between the federal government and the state governments. So the federal is the central power, and then the constituent powers are the 50 state governments. The federal government is in the Constitution given limited powers, and then the powers that are not given to the limited powers not to the federal government are then given to the states and the people. So what we have is a comparison of limited powers at the federal level, wide powers at the state level. Most of us don't act that way. We act like it all comes from DC, and that would be a nationalist system. We're not nationalists. So the reason I'm a Christian federalist is that drives us to the state. And then the states are the authority figures for the county and city and special district levels of government. So there's a lot going on there, and state is very powerful. That's where many of the laws that we exist under are made. They're made in our state legislatures. Many of us don't know the name of our state legislature, but we know the name of our U.S. Congress. We don't know necessarily when our state legislature is in session. When do they meet? Texas, for example, meets every other year. In my home state, the legislature meets January, February, and March. That's because in our state, my state, citizens are not political, they're not professionals, they're called citizen legislators. And so they're holding down normal lives just like you and I hold down. Then they take 3 months off, and they serve in the state house. So, how does your state work? I would ask each of your listeners. And just like with city government, just like with county government, go to the state government website and take my book, The Forgotten Realm, the state chapter, and compare it to how your state's described, and find out how your state works. Find out who represents you in what districts. Again, like Congress, the state system is different. So each state has a lot of autonomy to do its own way of conducting its government. So every state has, in its districts, has one state senator. And I don't mean a U.S. senator. I mean as a senator for your district, for your state legislature. But there can be different numbers of senators. There could be different numbers of representatives. So figuring out the system is first. And then knowing who holds the offices in the system, who actually represents your district. What's the number of your district? I live in District 6 in Moscow, Idaho, but I don't think very many people in my town necessarily know that they have a district and what the number is. And then I have one senator and 2 representatives that represent me. You have to ask, who represents you in your district? How do you get in touch with them? What are their positions? How do you influence them?
Yeah. How do you know? How do you know what are they up to? What are they doing? What are their positions?
Precisely. And then if you try to follow what they do when they're in session, it's a full-time job. I try not to have anxiety when our session begins to meet just after New Year's, because it just flies. And the bills begin in committee that the legislators are sponsoring, and most of us Christians don't testify in committee. We don't even know when the testifying takes place. And that's our opportunity as American Christians to speak to or for each bill.
So I'm in Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
And how do I become more aware of what my state representatives are doing? What's going on in Annapolis?
Well, there may be a family policy center or family policy institute who can help you with that. There are policy centers all over the country. Mine in Idaho is called the Idaho Family Policy Center, and they're part of a national network. And that's where it's okay to use the word national. Their network goes across the nation. Let's see. Also, signing up for emails from each person who represents you in your legislature so that you know what they're doing. But you're getting that information after the fact. But as you're just beginning to learn what your legislature does, you have to start with information after the fact. And then in most legislators that I know of come home monthly to meet in their Chamber of Commerce and talk to their constituents directly. Because again, because we're a republic, they represent us, they know that, and they come home just to meet with us. But it's very hard, again, for Christians to know, when do my legislators come home and when can I meet with them?
Yeah. We happen to have, by the way, you'd be curious to know this, we happen to have a lady in our church who regularly sends me emails about, here's what's going on in Annapolis right now. Would you pray for this? So she could be, if you have a lady like that in your church, she could be a great resource for information about what's going on, what's going down, who to contact, who to write, who to call, so on and so forth. Does that sound helpful to you?
Absolutely. And there are groups like that. It takes a while to uncover them. We have a group that does a podcast every day when the legislature is in session. You can also live stream what goes on. That's a good job for retired people to say, okay, we're going to divide up and take turns watching the live stream and then reporting back either to our church or to whatever group wants to affiliate and watch this and then send the message out to the public. So those can be full-time jobs. Now, this isn't necessarily a job with pay. Most of what I do watching the government isn't pay. And we can't get overwhelmed because so far we've mentioned city, county, and state. One person can't watch all of this. I've tried, and our knees buckle under the weight. But what our job is I think, as a citizens or as, in your case, pastors who want to encourage their people, is find your spot where you can help and do it. So you just mentioned this lady who is immensely valuable. Not everybody has to comment or watch and get the word out on state government. Some of us, you may have letter writers in your congregation. They can just, the first place to start is a thank you note to those who represent us, whether they're liberal or conservative. They're doing the job that we're not doing. And they're serving within the public sphere, and they should be thanked for that, even if you don't agree with their policies, because in the end, God put them there. And in the end, they need to know his truth. We can't clobber them over the head with it, but the book of Proverbs is replete with encouragements that we could send to those who govern for us, to just give them a little taste that Christianity isn't condemnation. Christianity is light and truth and salvation.
Nice. All right, let's talk about national government for a minute. So your book spends less time, I think it does, see if you agree, on the national government compared to local and state levels. If I'm right, it spends less time on national. Why?
Well, for one, there's so much to uncover at all the other levels. And for two, the media takes care of it for us. So, and then every civics book starts with the national level, and most don't get beyond that. And so I inverted the model and started with the city level, because it's closest to where we are, and we can most easily start to influence there. Now, this isn't to say that the national level isn't important. Um, there's a saying, all politics is local, no matter where it is. And in a sense, that's true because we vote at the local level for all the levels. But the federal government, it does set the tenor for what goes on. So, for instance, what drew me into the civil realm was a battle against green energy. God put fire at our family's back, and we had to walk into the wind. At that time, we had a liberal uh, administration in Washington, and it was so hard to find any articles on the internet that were conservative about our energy policies. And to the point that as an individual, I was made to feel like, am I crazy for believing that we don't need to go to carbon zero by 2030? Am I crazy for thinking that we're not ruining our planet with carbon dioxide? And that especially animals aren't ruining it, but it's part of the plan of photosynthesis. Now, under a conservative administration, there's all sorts of information available online. So, national really does influence, but it is also very well covered.
All right. I think I'm going to draw it to a close there, but I want to ask you, where can our listeners get a hold of your book? I'm sure they can get it from Canon Press. Is it also available on Amazon?
It's on Amazon. It's not actually on Canon Press. It's on Roman Roads Press. And though that's no problem. I'm also writing a civics curriculum. It's going to be out on July 4th. And it accompanies this book. The Forgotten Realm's not a textbook, but I am writing a curriculum to accompany it. It's called The Civil Realm, Civics for American Christians. And then the other thing in the works, it's Foundations in Liberty, the founding documents that shaped American freedom.
I'm impressed. You're assistant to the president at New St. Andrews College, and you're writing all these books. I guess in your spare time, huh?
Well, if you think as I do, I think we're on the verge of losing our republic. And so I spend what spare time I can working on how can I help save our republic. I don't want to lose my family in the process. And so there's a lot to do to wear the different hats. But if I could do the loud whistle, which I can't do, but I would whistle and say, hey, everybody, over here to the civil realm, let's serve Jesus here too.
Well, amen. Elizabeth Landis, your book, The Forgotten Realm, Civics for American Christians. I want to encourage our listeners to get a copy. Thank you so much for joining me today, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an honor.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. And to the listeners, thank you for joining us here on Grounded. Hope to see you next time.